Ms. Marina, approaching the bench.
Good morning, or almost afternoon. I'm Marina O'Connor. I'm the Bureau's licensing chief. So I'm going to first go over attachment, I believe it's, is it 5C or 5? Yeah, page 81. It's the table titled Licensing Application Status as of August 1, 2019 for fiscal year 1920. So these are our licensing applications for the new fiscal year, started July 1st. So that's why the numbers and volume will seem a little lower than usual. I'm just going to point out a couple of things on here. The first row, titled New Full Approval, those are our approval to operate for non-accredited institution applications. You'll see 21 in the pending assignment column. So those are ones that have not been assigned for review. But only 5 of those are complete applications. So the rest are incomplete, which means we can't move it forward or process it until we've received all the documents that are required to make it a complete application. And you'll kind of keep going across to the end of that row. The last column, average days to approve. And of course, yes, we have just started a new fiscal year, but it is lower than the prior meeting we had. It does continue to decline. Which is what we like to see and anticipate it to keep declining. The other thing I wanted to point out was towards the bottom, verification of exemption. So those are our verification of exempt status applications. You'll see so far in this fiscal year, we've received 26. And as you might remember from prior committee meetings, that had been a pretty high number of verification exemption applications that had been coming in since January 1st. And probably over the last 3-4 months, it's kind of been on average about 30 a month we receive. And I think that's probably our new norm now. It used to be before, just to give a little more history, the law change in 2017 that made verification of exempt statuses only valid for 2 years. So starting in Jan 1, 2019, we started to see a lot more of those applications come in as people wanted to re-verify their exemptions. There's a huge uptick in those apps received, but I think it's kind of leveled out a bit now, but it is definitely higher than that's definitely higher than what it was prior to that law. So I think this might be our new norm, and we're moving them along really well. We're reviewing them. So we're working through that workload pretty well. Is this still?
It's very persnickety, like if you're super close to it, it works,
Yeah.
but.
There. Okay. Okay, any questions on that table? No? Okay, just moving to the next table on page 82, you'll see this is a 12-month overview of those, what I refer to as full applications, our new approval to operate non-accredited institution applications, and it provides the number received, completed, and pending over the last 12 months, just so you can see kind of a side-by-side comparison of that workflow. And you'll see in the non-accredited apps pending over the last, let's say 4-5 months, it started to go up, but it is starting to come back down again, which is what we like to see. We don't want that number, creeping up too high. So I anticipate it to continue to come down the next few months. Any questions on this graph? Table. Okay. The next 3 graphs are basically a breakdown of those full approval applications received, pending, and completed over the last 3 fiscal years, just to provide a comparison to prior fiscal years of where we were at in prior years and where we are today and recently. So if anyone has any questions on any of those graphs. Okay. I'll skip to the last attachment, which is the total number of schools by location type and approval type. And this is as of August 1st, 2019. So by location type, we have 1,042 mains, 386 branches, 530 satellites for a total location of 1,958. And if you break up break down those approved schools by approval type. So the first column, it says ABMA, accredited in parens. Those are our approval by means of accreditation schools. 433 of those schools approved. And the next column, it says full non-accredited. Again, those are those full approval schools. Those are 568 with 1 conditional approval and 39 provisional approvals. And there's some footnotes there that further explain conditional and provisional approvals. And then the table below that was just us starting to report this on a continuing basis to the committee, so you can see the change in those numbers over time. So it starts back to when we first started reporting these numbers and to today's numbers, so you can see the trend. Any questions on any of that information?
Good job.
Okay.
I don't think so. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. O'Connor?
So just roughly,
Sure.
the number of locations has remained pretty constant over time, right?
Yeah, it's not a lot of fluctuation there.
Perfect.
It does look like it's gone down slightly, but it's not
Right. Yeah, a little bit, but
a huge
yeah.
drop. All right, great.
Good job, Marina.
Thank you, Marina. Anyone public comments relating to licensing? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, item E, annual reports. Mr. Bales.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So I don't have a lot of facts and figures, so there's no attachment to look at. I just have a couple of things to talk about. As you know, the 2017 annual report portal closed May 16th. There were 973 schools that were required to submit an annual report. 820 schools have submitted, so 84% of our schools. The annual reports unit currently is reviewing the 2017 submissions, and because the dates changed this past year, because the new portal, they have kind of a limited window to review before we start looking at the 2018 reports. So that the unit's super busy. And one of the things that's changed is the summary. So in the annual reports, if you go to the annual reports page and you look, there are charts and graphs and summaries based on the annual reports data that was submitted. Now that used to be basically static data. So it was collected as or at a given point in time, and it didn't change because it was gathered at that point. So the new system created allows that data not to be static, but to be dynamic. So if you go in there today and you look at the statistics, whether it's the number of students enrolled in a bachelor's level program or whatever it is that you're looking at, next week, if another school maybe has submitted their annual report, that data will change a little bit. So it's actually more accurate than previous years because we're continuing to add data to that as institutions continue to submit their annual reports. For the 2018 annual report, the portal opened August 1st. It closes December 1st. And as of this morning, we had about 69 schools that were in some stage of submission. Either they're close to the end or they just entered their institutional data, but 69 schools have at least started. And then I also wanted to update everyone on something that Marcus actually came up with. So we have, I think Beth mentioned it earlier, we have a new school analyst. And that person is part of the annual report unit, and they basically reach out to the new schools. So as a school becomes approved, we take a more proactive approach, reach out to the school and talk to them about the annual reports requirements. We talk to them about the school performance fact sheets, which can be kind of challenging. And we work with that school to make sure that they understand that when the time comes to submit their annual report, they have an idea and they know what to do. We think that's going to improve the number of reports that we get at the end of the year. And that's all I have for the annual reports unit. Does anybody have any questions?
So just to confirm that 84% of the schools submitted their annual reports on time, and that's a new record, right?
Yes, it is.
Just confirming.
Yes.
Just want to make sure that's on the record. Got it. Robert, are you going to handle the next section as well?
I am,
Okay,
yes.
so let me just check and see. Does anyone have any public comments on the annual reports before Robert moves on to education quality? Nope. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay, so the next section is, well, first of all, let me tell you, we have some new members here. So I am the chief of the Quality of Education unit, and I also oversee the annual reports unit. But the report on attachment 5D is what I'm going to be talking about right now. For the Quality of Education unit, one of our most prominent tasks is the oversight of institutions that are pursuing accreditation. So give you a little bit of history. In 2015, the law changed in California requiring institutions that are offering degree programs to be accredited or to seek accreditation. And so if you look at the information in the top part of this report, those are all the institutions that were approved to operate by the Bureau and were in operation as of January 1st, 2015. That have to become accredited by July 1st of next year, 2020. So initially we identified 142 institutions, and 108 of those institutions submitted an accreditation plan, so they decided they wanted to become accredited. And then there's a breakdown within each category. So as you can see, 37 of those schools have closed or let their approvals expire, or they've surrendered their approval. 17 were verified as exempt institutions. 16 surrendered their degree programs, so they stayed open but decided they weren't going to pursue degrees anymore. 4 have had their degree programs suspended. 26 have achieved accreditation, and 42 are currently in accreditation candidacy status. So those 42 schools have to become accredited by July 1st, 2020. The second group of institutions are institutions that have been given a provisional approval to operate. So these are schools that we approved after January 2015. They were limited to 2 degree programs, and they have to achieve pre-accreditation in 2 years and full accreditation in 5 years. And so the dates for those schools are based on when they were approved, the 2-year date and the 5-year date. So they all have varying dates that they have to achieve those milestones. So just about every month we have a school that's coming up for review to determine whether or not they met those benchmarks. So there are 55 institutions, so we've had 55 schools approved since 2015 to offer degree programs on a provisional basis. 4 have closed, 1 is currently on an extension to meet candidacy status, 3 have surrendered their degree program, decided not to choose accreditation, 3 have had their degree programs currently suspended, 9 have achieved candidacy status and they're working toward full accreditation, 32 are pursuing candidacy status, and 4 have achieved accreditation. And then the very bottom section just indicates the number of suspensions the Bureau has issued for lack of progress or lack of meeting the benchmarks of pre-accreditation or accreditation.
For the questions, are we at that time?
Robert, did you have anything else to present before David jumps in?
I do not. Go ahead, David.
Of the second set, the 32 pursuing candidacy status, what's the maximum length of time, calendar date they would have to hit that?
So it's 2 years from provisional approval. So when they receive provisional approval to operate their 2 degree programs, they would have 2 years to achieve pre-accreditation or candidacy status. But there's also a provision at SB 1192 provided in 2016 for up to a 2-year extension. So the schools could feasibly request an extension, and if the extension was granted, they could have an extra 2 years.
And in the first group of the 42 currently in accreditation candidacy status, they've got until July of 2020, so 10 more months.
That's correct.
Are there,
Yes.
do they have extensions?
They also
For them?
have, yes, they also have the opportunity to request a 2-year extension based on the institution showing strong progress, which is specifically called for in the statute.
Anybody else have any questions regarding the quality of education? All right. Oh, and you're probably going to talk about the IT system too. Well, hold on. Any public comment on the quality of education report before we move on to the IT report? Seeing none, go ahead.
So for this part, I'm going to ask that Sean O'Connor come up. He's actually the Chief of Project Delivery and Administrative Services for OIS. And Sean has really been the driving force from OIS in this project. I think we've had an awesome partnership. We've got a lot done. But I'm going to let Sean talk about the specifics because there's a lot of IT speak here. And I think he'd be better at explaining it.
Thank you, Robert. I'd like to let the committee know I will try to keep the IT speak to a minimum and just speak in layman's terms. But my name is Sean O'Connor. I'm with the Office of Information Services here at DCA. I'm the Chief of Project Delivery and Administrative Services. I had heard earlier that we have some new members, so I'm not going to take for granted that anyone knows what our business modernization initiative is. So I'm going to start with a brief background of what that process is, the Bureau's place in it, as well as some of our recent accomplishments, and then I will move on to what we'll be looking at looking ahead. And then, of course, at the end, I'll pause for any questions you may have on this particular process. So brief background on the Business Modernization Initiative. BPPE is one of 17 programs here at DCA, so roughly half the department, that is going through a process to modernize their current IT systems. That process strategically follows several key milestones. First, we look to document thoroughly your current business processes, and that is done through a partnership between BPPE and the Organizational Improvement Office here at DCA. And that's been accomplished over dozens, if not maybe 100 meetings with them, dozens of process maps, and then from those as-is process maps, we develop to-be process maps where we identify where those improvements from a new IT system could make the process more efficient. Through that process as well, oftentimes we find that and kind of puts a magnifying glass over the way a particular program conducts themselves and conducts business. And quite frequently, we have encountered from other programs, and BPPE may very well be an example of it, that merely taking that detailed look at their business process inspires some changes that can occur outside of an IT system that will have some benefit for the organization. So there's kind of tangential benefits that occur throughout that. Once those processes are mapped, a comprehensive list of functional requirements are identified for what a new IT system, what are the business needs that it needs to meet for the particular bureau. Do we want to enhance our ability to do on-site inspections? Do we want to enhance our visibility to the public and our ability to transact government online? Obviously, the answer to both of those questions is yes, but I'm merely offering those up as examples. From those functional requirements, we then go headlong into what is the California Department of Technology's project approval lifecycle. This is a standard process that any state agency who is undergoing a large IT project must go through. And the idea behind the project approval lifecycle, which is a 4-stage process, is to ensure that adequate planning has been done to identify what the scope of the project needs to be, what the approach to implementation will be, what the schedule will be, and then what's most important to almost everyone, what the cost will be. So this process fully vets out all of those components so that when we start our project, we have a solid baseline from which to succeed. So I'm happy to report that, as Robert had mentioned, this has been a very much a business-driven initiative. While on the IT side, we do a tremendous amount of work and support, it's a constant partnership. I would say probably Robert, Dr. Marion, and Lisa hear from me way more frequently than they would like, but they're always kind and courteous when I do reach out to them to meet on short notice regarding an item that has come up that is critical path for us to continue moving forward. So we have frequent meetings, frequent check-ins to keep everyone involved and keep the entire process transparent. How far along is BPPE in this particular process? I'm happy to report that BPPE is one of the furthest along programs. Process mapping and business activities, functional requirements were done a while ago. We are now on the cusp, literally on the cusp of completing our stage 3 of the 4-stage PAL process. In speaking with the California Department of Technology earlier today, I was hoping that I'd have an email that I received out in the audience there for me to officially tell you that we're completed with stage 3, but we anticipate that to occur today or tomorrow. That is a key part of the project approval lifecycle. Is that that approval represents our ability to go out for our major solicitation to bring on a system integrator to assist the Bureau, as well as 3 other programs who are at the same spot as the Bureau in modernizing their IT systems. I wanted to speak about the approach to this from a project implementation perspective. So thus far, I've talked about all of the planning efforts. And what those planning efforts have yielded is an approach to system implementation that really draws on several key things. First, the department's own lessons learned on large IT projects in the past, both the projects that have gone well and the projects that have not gone so well. So we're drawing on those lessons learned to inform our approach. The other item is we have done a lot of research regarding what the best practices are right now in the IT industry, and we believe we've crafted an approach that exemplifies those best practices as they exist today. So what is that approach specifically? We are looking at doing a phased approach over an 18-month project period for us to expand the Bureau's current functionality. The scope is to replace the current licensing and enforcement system that the Bureau uses at the conclusion of the project. But rather than taking a high-risk, big bang approach where we work for 18 months and have nothing to show for it until the end of those 18 months, we're going to use what the industry calls, and I told you I was going to try to limit the IT lingo, but I'm going to throw some out there now. We're going to use what the industry calls an Agile project approach. That enables us to take the overall scope of the project, segment it out, and deliver functionality to production, to the end users, to the internal users, earlier than the end of the 18-month project. So we are looking to focus our initial efforts within the 6 to 8 month period after project start to expand the Bureau's ability to transact government online through an external-facing website to accept applications, accept online consumer complaints, and as well as to implement some functionality in the back office that will assist the Bureau's staff and managers in prioritizing and completing that initial workflow of the enforcement process. So we've come to identify that as the key area we want to focus on initially in working with Dr. Marion, Lisa, and Robert. So that's going to be the first big effort. And from there, we are going to continue to implement the rest of the project to completely move the Bureau onto a modernized IT system. A couple other things I wanted to mention that were informed from lessons learned. First, the software solution that we are looking to go out and procure, the requirements that we've built around that would enable us to implement a system that is not a closed box. So about 10 years ago or so in the IT world, maybe 15 years ago in private sector, 10 years for the state, was an approach towards COTS, commercial off-the-shelf systems, that were a box you bought and plugged in, and then you did everything. It did certain things really well, but it really couldn't interface in real time with anything. It really couldn't interact with other systems who might be really good at doing a on-site inspection, but not so good at issuing licenses. The software requirements that we've put in that will complement the business requirements are to ensure we get a system that enables us to connect this core system with other software applications that would have benefits. rather than buying a closed box, we're buying something that connect with other software applications to really leverage and bring software applications into our digital ecosystem. Sorry, that's tech lingo again. That will represent the best of breed and allow them to do what they do best. Finally, one of the ways we're using to control costs on this particular contract is a work order authorization model. So this is a model that was used on the successful delivery of the Bureau of Cannabis Control's licensing system. And as opposed to a strictly time and materials or a deliverables-based approach to a large contract, this allows us to incrementally approve work for the contracted vendor to complete. So as opposed to blanketly writing them a check at the end of 18 months for a significant amount of money, we identify what we want to achieve over the next 6 weeks or 2 months, come to terms with how many hours it will take to achieve that, come to terms with what deliverables need to be included in that time period, and come to terms with what portion of our overall contract cost that is going to reflect. That will also include the identification of the vendor staff that will be working over that time period, and no work can begin until we actually approve that document. That allows us to really control the quality of work of the vendor, because we're not simply saying we're going to roll with the 12 people you have for the entirety of the project. And you know what? 2 of them really are not great performers and are causing us a lot of work. So we wouldn't be stuck with those individuals. We would be able to work with the vendor through this process, and it really gives us a lot of leverage to control cost as well as control the staff that they have on the particular project. And I kind of wanted to close before we go into questions with just mentioning again that it's been a great partnership so far between the Bureau and the Department's Office of Information Services. I have a high degree of confidence that the partnership that we've had so far and the level of candor and buy-in that we've received from the Bureau staff will really set the foundation for us to succeed. Projects are not easy. Google state IT projects, and you're probably not going to get results that build a lot of confidence for any sort of governmental project that occurs. But this department has had some success recently with the cannabis IT project, and we're bringing that momentum here to this project. And I'm really confident that our partnership will allow us to succeed. So with that, I'll conclude my comments and would be happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Did anybody notice he didn't take a breath that whole time?
I have a question.
For the record, did not look at my notes very often. So thank you.
And I'm one of the new people, so maybe this has already been answered in past meetings. Kudos to you, first of all, that doing this kind of thing. I've been on the employee side of this, digital and IT shifts, and they're so complicated and frustrating. Just a couple questions about, will this involve like a database shift? And if so, is there information that you have protections in place to ensure that anything that is saved is protected from disappearing into the cloud or whatever? I don't have the digital lingo.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, with all of the exposure that companies and agencies are having these days to hackers and just like, information getting out there, is there a piece of this plan that addresses those concerns?
Yes, so data security, we have quite a few system requirements related to data security. There's a lot of standards out there in regards to what type of data center the database can be stored at. Based on the type of data that we are going to be storing. So there is going to be sensitive information in this particular database, not just for the Bureau, but for the other programs that would be using this platform as well. So these would be data centers that have physical securities in place, as well as network securities in place. So it's very, very secure and meets all of the I forget what the acronym stands for, but there's a set of NIST standards that are IT security standards that's one of our core requirements, as well as some other requirements regarding the ability to keep role-based security on the internal side of things, to limit the amount of data for back office staff. If there's sensitive information that only certain units should see, we would be able to limit that as well. So we do have quite a number of security requirements, probably off the top of my head about 24 or so at minimum. And we've also partnered with the California Department of Technology, and all of our system requirements and all of our contract language goes through not only DCA's internal information security office, but also the California Department of Technology's internal security experts to ensure that we have all of our bases covered. And then I did want to say something about security, though, is we can put up as many security measures as we can around the data in the system, and there's always people out there that are still trying to get our security. So we are putting all those requirements in there, but you know, there's always phishing sorts of things and that sort of nature that occur. That's kind of outside of the nature of a system, but within the database itself, it is extremely secure, and we have met all the current standards that are included in the system requirements. As far as information getting out, the things that I'll comment on regarding that is that the system, we also have system requirements regarding who has accessed the particular system, if they've submitted or made a system change or a notification has gone out to them. All of those types of activities are logged with the time, down to the second, as well as the user who received that information or who committed that change to the system. So there's quite a bit of detail in regards to that as well.
I'm sorry. What training, and maybe Mr. Bales, you could answer this as well. What preparation is being made for training staff, particularly given the Agile project management and that you're going to roll it out piecemeal as functionality comes on board? Have we planned proactively for training staff to be able to effectively utilize the new system, including the creation of resources and materials, training manuals or new standards, a new SOP, something that they can use to make sure they're leveraging the computers?
Sure. So we've got a variety of artifacts that are included both within the system integrator solicitation that I was referring to, as well as artifacts that have been created by the Organizational Improvement Office here that will continue to be refreshed as we go through the process. So I'll start by talking about the training requirements that are included within the actual system integration contract. So within the scope of that contract, in addition to simply standing the system up, this integrator will really be the expert in the system that they are putting up for us. So they are most well suited to help us bridge that gap between training our staff and preparing them for to implement the system. So from a phased approach, we're going to align the training for each approach to occur as close as possible to the date that particular functionality will go live in production. What I've seen occur on projects is you do the training way too early, and the staff essentially negates all the benefit of the training, and they have to be completely retrained. So one of the key things about training is we will be planning it as close to possible as the phased launch. The other, in regards to deliverables, we do have included within the contractor's scope of work coming up with a training curriculum, coming up with training documents, tip sheets, and deliverables. And all of that is going to be complemented by consistent engagement from the Organizational Improvement Office throughout the duration of this project as well. We actually just met with them earlier this week, and we will have staff there that will complement the system integrators trainers and really be there on site to assist at key periods of the project to ensure that folks are really getting it, or if there are any quick mitigations that need to occur, quick tip sheets that need to be put together, those resources will assist in doing that. And what I've found is that really coming up with a great training plan, executing it as close as possible to system implementation, and then following that up with having folks there available after you go live for the first couple weeks, months, to really handle in real time those issues that come up, whether that just be simply reminding staff about new business processes in the system, or assisting in some strange call that's coming from an external user who is reporting to us an experience we didn't intend or is abnormal. So those are the key areas we're going to try to focus on and implement and execute in order to support this as a successful transition.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This may be a math problem, is why I didn't follow, but how long from today do you estimate it will be until you start to roll out the Agile process?
Sure. So I can give you kind of target timeframes that we have identified and shared that we feel like are realistic. So with a stage 3 approval of the 4-stage PAL process occurring today, provided the solicitation goes what we believe, how we believe it will go. The project will start somewhere in the December, January timeframe of this year. Within 5 to 6 months after that, we believe we will be launching some functionality into production. So we are, those are the timeframes we are looking at. And it's an 18-month total project schedule, so 18 months from the December, January timeframe. And that timeframe will be formally baselined at the time that we complete our stage 4 and complete sign off on our contract with the system integrator.
So it's 18 months from December, January projected?
Yep.
Rather than from the 5 to 6 months after that when you start the functionality?
Correct, yes. So it's a full 18-month project period. New functionality being delivered, we're anticipating every 5 to 6 months or so
So mid-22
for the complete project completion.
project?
Yeah. And then we also have included within that, so the project period itself is 18 months, but we also have shown in the past that you have a big project team and then you launch. You don't want everyone to cut and run, because after you've launched functionality into production, inevitably either there's some defects that come up that you didn't anticipate, or you start using it every day and you realize, oh, I really wish we could have done something slightly different. So to provide us some flexibility there, the contract is an 18-month project, as well as a year of maintenance and operations baked into the total contract. And that is a recommendation that comes down from the California Department of Technology, as well as it's one that I support, because we have found that having a solid maintenance and operations team after you launch is one of the key drivers of success. And furthermore, over that period after we do the project launch, that will be the period of time in which the system integrator is training state staff to be the maintainers of this system moving forward, so that we're not beholden to a particular contract vendor in perpetuity to maintain this system.
And I may have just missed this, since there was a lot there. At what point does the data that's existing in the current system get input into the new system?
Sure, that'll be incrementally over the 18-month project period, and it's the project approach will be the detailed levels of that will be formalized at the with the system integrator as we finalize the contract and actually sign off on the final bid from the system integrator. But it's likely that we'll take a form of module by module approach, and there may be some, whatever term I'll term as scaffolding, that is built up to leverage some integrations between the current system and the new system. For example, to integrate and allow us to read in the approved institutions, so that somebody can pick those from a drop-down list, perhaps when we're sending in a consumer complaint. So there might be limited integrations that are built as scaffolding kind of throughout the project, but at the end of this, the scope of the project for BPPE is to have all functionality completely migrated onto this new system.
And theoretically, that's not done manually. That's going to be some kind of a computer process.
Correct. We have data conversion within the scope of the contract.
What's the other question? Okay, I think that was it. Thanks.
Have you scheduled any parties and general rejoicing among the staff?
Found that until we get successful production functionality in place, the parties could jinx us. So we'll hold off for maybe a month after our initial functionality release, when we're getting positive reviews from you all and from the general public, and then we'll throw the party.
Just for new members too, the Bureau and its predecessor getting an up-to-date IT system is something that has been in the works for at least 10, probably 15 years or more.
And the poor people of the Bureau have been using the system from like 1820 and trying to figure out how to provide us the endless amounts of data that we ask for every quarter using this system. So there will be much rejoicing, and I will buy the champagne when we get to the month after the 18 months is up and everyone's happy.
I will save the recording of this
The year
meeting.
after. Okay. Great job. Thank you. That was the most thorough and well-informed report we've had on this system thing, I think, so far. So thank you for all of the details. Really helpful.
Thank you.
Robert, did you have anything else, or
There's nothing for me to add to that.
without a breath and without looking at his notes? Very impressive. Any public comment on the IT project before we move on to our next item? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is 5H, Office of Student Assistant and Relief. Welcome, everyone. So we're on 5H, the first Romanet 1 overview of Oser activities and summary report.
I think we've moved into good afternoon territory. I think we've just
Have.
crossed over. So good afternoon, everyone. Scott Valverde, Chief of the Office of Student Assistance and Relief. And to help Kate, I'm going to be covering the first two items, and then Lisa will be covering the STRIF update, and Christy will handle our last item under the OSAR heading there. So covering, starting with the first item on an update on OSAR's outreach activities, I'll be referring to attachment 5E in your packet. I believe it's on page 89. And that will cover both of my items, both the summary of activities and also our closed school outreach update. I'll be referring to that document. So we're all on the same page there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So just to cover the document itself, a couple of housekeeping items. The time period covered is through the entire fiscal year 18-19 and also up through August 12th as well. So it's basically everything from July 1 up to current in terms of our activities. The document covers the title of the event type, the date the event took place, and the location. And basically, what I wanted to talk to, particularly for the benefit of the new members, are kind of what brief overview of what we do at each of our types of outreach events. We basically have our outreach into three buckets, if you will. One of which is our partnership with the California Department of Veteran Affairs through the CalTAP program, Transition Assistance Program, helping discharging or soon to discharge service members with information regarding making an informed choice around the use of their GI benefits and just in general. That's one. The second bucket is our closed school outreach efforts as well. I would include within that bucket situations where individual schools have particular educational programs that are discontinued, which carries with it STRIF eligibility and the need for additional student assistance. So closed schools, program discontinuation would be sort of the second bucket. And then the last one are college fairs, educational events, resource fairs, basically primarily targeting K through 12 students and their families, looking at making an informed choice and receiving some assistance about the process going through selecting their next step in higher education as well. We've done that, as you can see on the chart, up and down the state, geographically in various areas, various avenues with events, both put on by outside parties, put on by our OSAR, and in partnership with some OSAR partners as well. On the CalTAP side, starting there again, primarily for new members, our focus is providing information about the differences between private post-secondary education, public post-secondary education, 2- and 4-year degrees, accreditation, tips about researching colleges, basically some red flags that have been identified historically around predatory admissions, targeting veterans, and the use of Title 38 or GI benefit funds. And it's done in a combination of both presentation style and then also one-on-one appointments with those individuals and their families as well. And this is done on military installations up and down the state of California, and it's been a very positive and fruitful partnership. The closed school workshops, our format are generally provide general information about the state and federal relief programs, various types of loan discharge programs, information related to transferability of their units, if there's another institution that's involved, that there's a formal teach-out agreement in place or other transfer locations where students may be able to transfer. We often bring them in. If it's a school that has approval for federal financial aid, we always invite the U.S. Department of Education to come attend and co-present, answer any questions that students may have about their financial aid, and just provide any assistance the student may need generally as well. And our work goes beyond the actual event date itself, the actual in-person interaction with students. We then engage in sort of a wraparound services, case management sort of approach with each individual student who needs assistance, getting through the various impacts that they're facing based on being enrolled in a school that closed often abruptly. And then the last are our college fairs. We often have tables, exhibitor tables. We're getting more and more involved with the National Association of College Admission Counselors. This is our second year working with them. The first year we pretty much just had a resource table. The second year they really liked what we are doing and understood a little bit more about what we were doing, and we were able to do breakout sessions for large groups as well. And then other events, we'll just provide information about Oser, its free services, really act as a liaison to information and free resources that are out there to help them, being the student and their families, make an informed decision about higher education. And two things I want to highlight, two specific things I wanted to highlight before I move on to the closed schools or open up to questions you might have on the first item. The first one is something that we believe is a really creative, hopefully you agree, creative idea, an approach that we piloted on the last page there, July 30th, 2019 in San Diego, an event that we titled the Student Tuition Recovery Fund Claim Acceleration Workshop. We're open to ideas about names. I always tell my staff there's no specific Oser way or things that are embedded in Oser yet because we haven't been around very long. So the title, we can maybe tweak a little bit moving forward, but basically the concept that we piloted and successfully delivered was where we went out on the road, we being our staff, went out at an off-site location in a particular geographic area that had been particularly hard hit by school closures recently, which is the greater San Diego area, and reached out to students on rosters and other sources of contact information that we had based on those closures, and reached out to them proactively and invited them to come at a location that was convenient for them to meet with our staff and have one-on-one appointments with them to help them walk through their STRIF applications, whether they were unable to come to one of the formal workshops that we did, or if they did and then they had follow-up questions, or that they had submitted a claim and had some questions or were struggling to get additional documentation to prove their economic loss, or quite frankly, whatever the circumstances were, they had an opportunity to come and meet with us one-on-one. And it worked out very well. It's something that we are looking at expanding into other geographic areas, take some lesson learned and move forward with that. So we're pretty excited about that one. The second one that we're excited about is not on here yet, but last year we had our first college preparation workshop that we put on ourselves, that we organized and delivered, had breakout sessions and general information and brought in resource partners as well. It was a smaller pilot effort, and one of the lessons learned was to make it more effective would be to partner with a specific local high school district, and in this case we'll be partnering with in our next event, the Natomas district, right across the street here. And we're really looking forward to that. It'll be on September 28th, and we're working directly with them in their college and career counseling efforts to sort of embed our message in with their existing message about college preparation. And again, helping students through what is a pretty challenging time going into their senior year and thinking about what they're going to do next, what types of programs are out there, what types of resources are available to them to help what is an otherwise pretty overwhelming process seem a little bit less overwhelming with the assistance of my team and our expertise. We'll be doing workshops on financial literacy and student debt, student how to pay for college, affordability, researching different types of colleges, and partnering again with their counselors as well. So that will be forthcoming, and we look to do more of those in the future. Are there any questions on our proactive outreach efforts?
I have one question,
Sure.
just one. On your closed school outreach, I think you may have told me before and I've forgotten, do you coordinate with the legal aid service available in the area where the school closed?
We don't specifically coordinate with them. We work with them commonly because they're often representing students who've submitted STRIF claims, so our staff are often working with them. It's a resource that we definitely make students available if they need that. We haven't specifically reached out with them in advance of a workshop to have them on site.
Is that something that you will be contemplating doing in the future?
My general approach is whomever would best be able to help the students given that specific situation that they're facing based on that closure. I'm open to whatever resource may make sense in that situation. We've examples. We don't do a cookie cutter, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know, we've got situations where programs were affected, where they were looking at transferring to other institutions, and they were licensed by another party, like, for example, the Board of Vocational Nursing, and the students had completed a certain number of hours under a BVNBT approved program and needed to go to another one, and other schools jumped in. We coordinated and worked with them and brought them into the process, or if there was a formal teach out, the other school that's involved, or if there's a local community college that has a career ed program that aligns with the program that was that the students were enrolled in the closing school, we'll bring them in. So I do have some specific statutory partners that are called out specifically in our law that I do contact every single time, every single closure, regardless of the situation. But beyond that, we look at each one individually and would pull in whomever we need. So.
I think that there are quite a number of some legal aid officers may not get involved in this, but I think quite a number of them do. So I would recommend that you just always check to see if there's one in the area that you could partner with, because I think they are, do quite a bit of work in this area. It might be very helpful.
I appreciate that. Yeah, any recommendations we'll take. The other one I missed was local assembly members or senators that are represent a geographic area. The DCA always reaches out to them as well, and they've come on site as well to observe and or share information. And so hopefully that's reflective of what I'm saying, that we'll bring in the partners that we need regardless, and we try to customize it to that individual situation.
And I just a comment is on the doing the individual outreach on the closed school. I think that's a great idea. I hope that works well.
Thank you. Yeah, first round was very successful. We did slots for appointments. They were all filled. The feedback from students was very, very positive. So,
How many participants did you have in that event?
25, I think. I think it was 25 to 30 slots, somewhere in that ballpark.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on proactive outreach? We actually trickled into closed school outreach there as well, which is fine. But just a little bit of specifics and in terms of updates for the committee itself. Last time we were here was in February, and that was right around the time that we had wrapped up the bulk of our outreach for the Dream Center holding schools and the ECA schools, the Brightwood Art Institute, et cetera. And so at that time, we were very, very busy, as you might recall, getting out to all of those sites. We did do a couple of secondary workshops as well that you can see on the chart for some of those campuses that needed additional assistance, or if we just weren't able to get everyone. That's part of the challenge when we have a very short notice. We get out there as quickly as we can. Sometimes we only have 24 or 48 hours notice, but often not every student that's impacted by the closure is able to come immediately. And so we often have had to go back and do secondary workshops as well. But we also do things that aren't reflected on this chart for closed school outreach as well, in terms of conference calls and individual calls, group calls, emails, documents that apply to students. Any way that we can connect with students that's most convenient to them to get them the information they need. we will definitely do that. So the good news is, since the last time we reported, if you kind of move forward beyond sort of those February dates up to the current, we have not had any, knock on wood, any large, super large closures to report on since the ECA and Dream Center closures. I would say the largest or most significant since the last time I reported out was at a technical college. You'll notice there on the last page that one constituted the need to go out twice as well, and it was a little over 100 students and had a federal financial aid, so DOE came out and jointly presented that workshop with us, et cetera. So, but we are staffed and trained and ready to deploy on short notice if there is a future large closure moving forward. So,
One other thought or question. I remember us talking about after Corinthian schools closed, and we were, at least I was, and I think others were kind of surprised that the number of students applying for STRIF seemed very low compared to the number that probably would be eligible. And have you noticed that, you know, in your with your work now, that you're seeing larger percentage of students applying for STRIF or not?
I don't think we've really. That's be an interesting thing to do. Would be to dig into the ECA, the Brightwood and Art Institute closures, and look at number of students that we had on the roster, and number of. Probably getting to that point now where we could do a pretty good evaluation of pretty close to all the students I would assume that would apply for STRIF from those closures at this point. Probably have, I mean, with a few caveats in there. So I haven't delved into that to do an actually comparative, but it feels like we're getting a lot, you know what I mean? We definitely are getting a lot. But as it relates to the percentage of the number of students that were impacted, number one, it's a kind of a tricky number to get at anyway in terms of the 120-day window and the consistency and efficacy of the rosters that we get, et cetera. But I think we could, that's something we could look at moving forward.
I wanted to,
Hi there.
for some reason I talk and people look over there. The sound must bounce.
Misdirection.
As I was thinking about Margaret's comment about reaching out to legal aid, I just want to note, I don't think this is something that you don't already know, but the U.S. Department of Ed is not making decisions on thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of these discharge applications. So I do think having them there is obviously useful, but I think given that, it might be a high recommendation to have a more objective source as to what avenues there are to pursue. And there are legal aid organizations, as you know, across California that are doing this work.
Oh yeah, I appreciate, and as I mentioned, we definitely work with them quite a bit because quite a few of the claims that come in, they're being represented by legal aid, and so we know and work with them directly on individual claims. But I do appreciate the feedback on thinking about how to bring them in a little bit more proactively on the front end as well. But I definitely can say that those connections are being made.
Just a comment.
Sure.
From as a school, we are seeing the loans getting discharged pretty timely.
I think closed school
Closed school
discharges are
discharge,
going
yeah.
through pretty easily.
Yeah,
It's the borrower defense claims that are getting
Yeah.
held up.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Exactly. I think Lisa has the next item.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I was going to say, let's introduce Lisa. But for those who don't already know Lisa, Lisa, are you going to talk about the fund claims and impact statistics?
Yes,
Item
I am.
Romanet 3. Thank you.
So hi, I'm Lisa Raffretti. I'm the Deputy Bureau Chief. And this is going to go over the statistics on page 95. And these is the Student Tuition Recovery Fund claims that the Bureau receives on behalf of the students of closed schools. And the first box, it shows that we've received over 1,300 claims in the fiscal year. In the second box, we've paid out 156 claims, totaling a little over $1.4 million. And then into the third box, we're talking about the current claims that we have in-house at this time. We have a little over 1,200 that are actively being worked on by the student, or I'm sorry, we have a little over 1,500 that are actually being worked on by the analyst in either with OSAR staff, helping them with their getting the documentations for their eligibility, or with the STRIF staff who are actually working the numbers and making the recommendations for the status of the STRIF claim. And as you can see, if you look at prior years, which we don't have here, but there has been an increase in claims that we've received. And we really mark those up to the efforts of OSAR, or so with OSAR going out and doing the outreach with the students and doing the one-on-one approach with the students and helping them with their claims. We've really seen an increase in claims and an increase in the completeness of the claims. So a lot of outreach with the continued outreach with the Corinthians, ECA, Dream Center, and so forth. This really increased the claims. Right now, unfortunately, we do have a backlog. We have 706 claims that are still waiting to go through the process, either with OSAR or with the STRIF analyst.
Lisa, is that 706 included in the 1518, or that's an addition?
No, that's an additional. Right. And then if you look down further, our current fund balance is just a little over $25 million. And then you have the fiscal year balances showing that it continues to decrease slowly, but it is decreasing. And on the back page, I think I would like to make this a question for the committee collectively to decide if this is valuable. These were some of the big school closures that we were keeping track of, the total number of claims and claim amounts being paid out. So I'll leave that up to you if you guys want to continue to see this, if you want other schools added to this, or if this helps at all.
Yeah, I would say at this point it's probably time to add the Dream Center schools and the ECA schools to the big list here, since we're getting outside of the, although I would keep the Everest and Heald on here with the potential legislative change that will expand their eligibility, so.
Took
assuming
the words
that's-
out of my mouth there, yeah. It's something to track if that bill goes through, for sure.
Right.
So.
Okay, that's pretty much all I have. Do I have any questions?
I have some questions. I'm one of the new people, so if, again,
And I looked at that way, not that way. Just
Good job. Good job. So I'm not stating, I'm making an obvious statement when I say that backlog's pretty heavy. But I don't see information here that would help me understand why. Is it I think it was Beth made a graph that showed, for example, how many applications have been pending for X number of months. How many applications are pending because individuals haven't submitted everything. It's hard to understand what the issue is, and maybe you could just speak generally to what you perceive the issues to be.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question, and a great idea for us to add on here some of that information for our statistical purposes. I really believe that a lot of it is we have the new process with OSAR coming in and OSAR doing their work along with the STRIF analysts doing their work. So we have new steps that have been added to it, which is going to make it take longer. So we have that aspect of it. And then again, the outreach that's been done is we've seen an increase in the amount of STRIF claims that we're receiving. So I think all of that compiled together is why we're having such a backlog. I think the Bureau has consistently had a backlog in claims. It just seems that right now the number is kind of high. So we are working diligently to lower that number and to try to get some more resources and so forth. So we do notice it. We do know that we need to work on that, and that, obviously getting the funds back into the students' pockets is our number one priority. So thank you for your comment, and we'll add some statistics onto our information.
This is the
here.
first time I remember us even having a backlog of STRIF claims, so
Yeah.
this is new.
So
We've usually always been caught up.
absolutely. So a couple things. One, and this is a prediction that we actually have been talking about for a while. If we knew that the outreach that OSAR was going to do was going to generate more information going to the student, and then on the one-on-one time that we also spend with students was going to generate some sort of additional work. And so this is something that I have been talking about, and so now you're starting to see it come to light. So it's like, good job, team, we're doing a great job. But on the backside, it's like, okay, we have all these more, claims that we need to process. So this is going to also been a part of a larger discussion that I've had with DCA, just in regards to steps that we may need to take in the future to make sure that we can process these things a little bit quicker. So this definitely is not unforeseen, and I said it's a tribute to the good work that the folks in OSAR have been doing.
Yeah, and I think couple that with the request to add the additional the ECA and Dream Center closures to the large impact. I think it'll document and validate that moving forward, that those two very large closures in a very short amount of time within this time period covered in this report, in addition to Corinthian claims that are continue to come in based on our outreach in that area, all just sort of for lack of a better word, a perfect storm. And I appreciate Kate's comment that it is not what we've seen historically in the past. We've also had some key positions that have recently been filled that haven't quite caught up yet in terms of that front end process.
The current claims, you've got analysts, first review, complete recommendation pending of 260. Do you have a gut feel for how many of those are going to be, yes, the student should be paid something versus?
I really don't. I don't see them until they come across my desk. And the recommendations isn't made until the STRIF analyst actually reviews everything and can make that determination. So it's kind of a tough guess there.
Okay. But I'm in a agreement. I mean, usually these students need their, this is a tough population that
All right. David, if
they
you
shouldn't wait too terribly long.
I agree. If you look at the top one, you can see that, 156 were paid and only 17 were not paid, or 23 were not paid. So that can kind of give you an idea of, I guess, historically what is being paid versus not paid.
But then if you look at the large ones, ineligible, denied, 339 versus 205 paid, it's almost a reverse.
Right, and I think those big ones are, usually we saw that those closed school loan discharges were going through pretty quickly, and there were no additional funds that were paid outside of that the student needed to be refunded for.
Okay.
And it's also probably worth reiterating something that Kate mentioned as well, as there's an assembly bill that's working its way through that if enacted as currently drafted would push the eligibility for Corinthian claims back to 2010 from where it's currently at right now at 2014. And so it creates the possibility, and we've done this in some of the bill analysis, that claims that may have previously been determined ineligible based on the time that the student was enrolled may now be eligible. And so we fully intend, if that law were to pass and be signed by the governor, to engage in an outreach campaign and efforts to make sure that all students who are eligible under the new statute should be reimbursed.
I'm delighted that you are getting more applications into STRIF. I think that is terrific. That's what the whole point of this
Thank you.
program was, and I'm glad to hear it. I think when you add your statistics, it might be helpful to add, just to show that, the number of applications received in previous years, along with, the
trend.
other stuff that
Sure.
Natalie
Absolutely.
was talking about. On the backlog, you mentioned that part of that is because, now there's a OSAR step, but if someone is working with OSAR on filing an application, that doesn't come in to be a backlog until the student actually files that application, right?
The applications are usually, even if they are filed with the Bureau, OSAR still provides some assistance.
Right, so at that point, OSAR is helping to make sure that they've got everything in and so forth. But I'm assuming a lot of the ones that OSAR that is working with are people who haven't yet
aren't
filed.
aren't here yet because they haven't even filed. Yeah, like for
Exactly.
example, that acceleration workshop that we talked about, they
Right,
may not be
right.
captured here yet, but they will be once we've worked.
But the
with them,
ones
so
where
that's
you're
true.
assisting people after they
True.
filed are here.
Correct. You got it.
Any other questions before we move on to our final part of the OSAR presentation?
I guess the other question is, you've seen this coming. Do you have things in process that you are planning to deal with it differently, staffing or some other way, so that this big lump can be reduced as far as the
Big lump.
backlog?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Yes.
That's all we can say.
That's all you can say.
I have a quick
One
question.
mentioned jinxing earlier, like Sean, I think.
So regarding the bill, I think it's, I think it's AB 1346, that would expand the eligibility. Do you have any concept of how you think that might impact OSAR's operations? Like, how big is that universe of students?
It could be huge. It takes eligibility back all the way to January 1 of 2010.
Okay.
Thousands, I would say.
Although when you look at the Corinthian schools and the percentage of students who were eligible potentially, and the percentage who actually filed applications, even for the current time period, it was minuscule compared to the tens of thousands.
And I think a lot of, oh, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, but we're still going to conduct outreach to all of them.
Absolutely,
So it
but-
has the workload impact regardless.
Sure,
Yeah.
but doing outreach going back to 2010, you're not going to have as much success either because so much time has passed. So I don't know how many you're going to get, but I'm doubtful it will be as many as, we would think it should be,
Yeah, it's just, we don't know.
Bill does other things as well that would have workload impact.
I'm not familiar with it, but if it is going to bring in a lot more, and if our fund is going down below 25 million, then we need to start thinking about whether we need to start charging a STRIF fee to students probably in the next year or so, I would think.
I think that triggers statutory, correct?
20
Correct.
million, I think, is the
But it's not
cutoff, right?
supposed to drop below 20 or above 25. It has to drop below 20?
Yeah, I think the other thing too, and this doesn't eliminate so if 1346 goes through, like Scott was saying, not only does it expand the Corinthian timeframe, but it does have some other additional economic loss options. So it's obviously going to increase your workload either way. But for I think one of the reasons, and you guys can probably validate this, that we did not see a ton of claims with the Everest students was because the programs were not very expensive, and most of them, when they got their closed school discharge, were completely covered because they were Title IV, basically covered their whole program. So but that won't necessarily eliminate the fact you guys having to go through the work of determining that. So the workload piece is still there, but I don't know how much of an impact it will have on the fund, right? So
Correct. And then the closed school loan discharges wouldn't have gone all the way back to 2010. So
that's true. Yeah, it would be interesting to see how that expands. Okay.
And the expansion of economic loss applies to all students, not just the Corinthian
Right,
students
exactly.
as well.
Yeah,
so.
that's a broader, okay. Okay, so any other questions before we get to Christy? No? Okay, so I want to preface this with there was a specific request made and some additional questions, and so I think you're going to do a quick presentation, and then if people have any questions specific to that, we'll address those first, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the detail with Margaret's questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Christy Shields. I'm an attorney with the Legal Affairs Division of the department, and I'm assigned to assist the Office of Student Assistance and Relief. And the memo was in your packet. I'm not going to go through the entire memo. I hope you've read them, memo. But essentially, there were questions raised at prior committee meetings regarding whether OSAR staff were involved with processing STRIF claims and whether they were performing their duties consistent with the Private Postsecondary Act. And so we went through the analysis. You can see on pages 2 and 3 of the memo the types of duties and functions that the office performs more generally, but Scott, Mr. Valverde can, as the chief of OSAR, can fill in more detail if you need that from a process perspective. But the bottom line is we reviewed the laws, provisions, outlined in the Act and the duties that OSAR is currently performing, we believe that they're performing their duties consistent with the Act, including, in particular, actively helping students with determining their relief eligibility for STRIF and other programs, identifying and obtaining necessary records, and completing and submitting applications to the Bureau to receive the maximum recoverable under the STRIF. There is another unit in the Bureau, the STRIF unit that Ms. Raffretti mentioned, that does its own analysis and review of the STRIF claims to determine whether the claim should be recommended for denial or payment. And then Ms. Raffretti oversees that unit, and she makes the decision on whether to approve or deny the STRIF claim. So OSAR is not involved in that process. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair to determine whether there are any questions about the memo or any other questions you might have on OSAR.
Why don't we start with that? For those who've had a chance to review the memo, do you have any questions for Christy about the breakdown of the duties as relates to the regulations and statute? Okay. We'll do you last. So I wanted to make sure that, because I know she was prepared to address your question specifically, but I wanted to make sure everybody else, if they had questions, we'd just do those first. No? Okay, then we shall move.
So I don't know whether you want to, Ms. Ryder, present your questions, or if you want Scott to respond and explain the questions, or, because a lot of your questions were process-based and not legally necessarily questions I can answer. So I will defer to Mr. Valverde, and where there's legal issues, I'll help and assist in responding to those questions.
What I did is I sent an email in for Christy, and so you have a copy of that, and if you want to just walk through them, we can just go one by one. I'm sorry we don't have copies for everybody, but I don't know if it's easier to me to pose the question. It's probably easier if you just go ahead and respond, and if you think you can make it clear, or however you'd like.
So I would recommend that Scott just go ahead and address the information based on you see fit.
However you want to do it.
Okay, so the first question was on page 2 and 3 of the memo, there's a discussion, as I indicated, of the duties that are currently being performed. And so Ms. Ryder asked, in connection with the duty of OSAR to provide assistance to students who have been affected by the unlawful activities or closure of an institution regarding their rights under state and federal law, how, if at all, does OSAR assist students who file or might have grounds to file a complaint with the Bureau, the Department of Ed, or another state agency?
OSAR would provide information to the student in terms of how to access the Bureau's or DCA's complaint form, the instructions, answer any questions that they may have on the complaint form, walk them through it if they need it. Frankly, in actuality and practicality, mostly we cross paths with students in situations where the school's already closed or are closing, and therefore are disinclined or don't see the benefit in actually filing a formal complaint at that point. But if they needed that help, we would provide that help to them and or work with enforcement directly if that was the best approach to be able to help that student. My overarching answer to this and all the questions about helping file complaints with different agencies are, we do what we need to do individually with that student to help that student. And if that means getting on the website with them and directing them to wherever this other outside entity's resources are, website is, information is, complaint form, we'll do that. If they already have it and then they have questions, we'll help them with those questions. If it's an agency that we have a direct connection with or a pre-existing relationship with, we'll contact that agency and help and coordinate services the best we can. I really, again, try to stay away from the cookie cutter approach, process 1, 2, 3, 4. This is how we walk them through an application or a complaint or a problem. We've really trained staff and hired staff who look at things very holistically, are trained on all the existing resources that are out there, and are comfortable reaching out to those outside resources to help the student. As it relates specifically, again, to the complaint, it would be where the form is, answer any questions about completing the form, do we need to connect with enforcement directly, is there another agency involved, and we would proceed accordingly.
Just to follow up on that, do you help them locate documents they might need to file their complaint, that kind of thing, the same way you would like for closed school? And then if someone applies for closed school, but they're not eligible for closed school, but they might be eligible for
Borrower's defense. or
yes,
so-
more
yeah,
defense,
we
then
definitely
you
connect
help them with that.
We 100% will connect with them, connect with those other outside programs or resources that could help them, including, and our staff's pretty savvy in that as well. We've got a lot of outside training from DOE and other resources about types of programs that are out there. And if one option doesn't work, then we'll look at the secondary option. Yep.
And so then the next question was about filing complaints with relevant accrediting agencies.
Or do we skip DOE?
I thought you covered DOE. I'm sorry.
Well, the only
Go
other thing
ahead.
I would add
I
to
took that as an answer holistically to all of those.
Okay, that's
Is that-
great.
Is that correct? Or?
That is great, and if I can just add, though, to DOE specifically, that is one of our statutory partners, and we always invite them to any closed school workshop where the school had Title IV funding or there were Title IV funding issues related to that. And so we often skip sort of the middleman and the referral in that situation. They're there in real time, in person, answering any questions the student may have. And so if they have any complaints or any issues related to their loans, that we get those answered for them in real time.
I have a question regarding that. Does the department send out somebody from Region 9, or do they, because of geographic proximity, or do they have an equivalent OSAR analog? Or
No, it's Region 9 San Francisco office,
Okay,
right? Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I covered that, all of those.
What about the accrediting agency?
That would be the same.
Same
Yep,
thing?
yep.
Okay. The next question I will respond to, you asked whether the staff locate and or obtain assistance from legal counsel for students, and they do not do that. There is no authority for staff to refer consumers to legal counsel. We also don't recommend that state employees do that because we have a conflict of interest code that prohibits state employees for providing economic gain or advantage to any private person. So we have to be careful about that referral. In addition, we don't want to be in a situation where the referral happens and then it doesn't go well for the student, then the state has a liability exposure. So we tell, and this happens across the department, where consumers will say, do you have any legal advice about this? Or do you know an attorney I can use? And our standard response is that, if you feel like you need legal advice and counsel, you're free to seek legal counsel of your choosing to address that. We're not authorized to give legal advice or referrals. So
I think you probably could refer them if they might qualify to legal aid without any problem, to say, here are these organizations, if your income fits, that you can contact legal aid.
well, I would recommend against referring legal counsel at all. I think that the Bureau is not authorized to provide referrals for legal counsel. What they're authorized to do is to provide information on free nonprofit community-based resources. And so that covers a lot, and I think I leave it to the discretion of staff who they have information about. They've asked you and any other advisory committee members to provide information about resources, and they can provide information, but I don't want them recommending or promoting or referring, because it
No, I'm saying
really,
that
that
would be
would be my concern.
Right, that would be a nonprofit community organization, legal aid.
Right, but
you're just saying
again-
these exist, and you're not, you can't recommend, this is a good one, that's a bad
Can't
one. whatever.
recommend, we can't recommend or refer consumers. In my opinion, it would be a liability exposure for the Bureau and for the OSAR staff. But, and it's same thing for whether they give advice on filing a lawsuit. Again, they're not authorized and they're not attorneys. So I wouldn't feel comfortable having staff trying to give that kind of information or advice to consumers. So again, I think that Scott mentions resource sheets that they hand out to students. We certainly can continue to develop that resource list and provide that to students, but I wouldn't want them to say, I think you should go here, there, or anywhere.
No, but on your resource list, you certainly could include legal aid organizations,
That
right?
would be
And
something
we
we can
can provide
explore
that.
that, and if you have any other community-based organizations you're aware of, please feel free to provide that information and we'll update our list.
No, I'm not
definitely add it to the
suggesting you start referring people to individual attorneys.
Because if you want to refer them, feel free to refer to my firm as well.
Yeah,
So
you can refer to me
we
too.
will definitely welcome the information and review it.
Just real quickly on that, and I understand your point. State bars are another way of avoiding what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
getting someone to a portal where then the referral can
They might have information on how to find an attorney. I think they have attorneys by zip code and specialty on
Yeah,
the
they
State
have
Bar's
a pretty
website.
good- yeah.
Right. So and I think they do have information on how to select an attorney, like what you
Right.
should look for.
Yeah.
So that would be something we could tell them, feel free to check out calbar.org and they may have some information to help you on how to select an attorney.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. I wouldn't see a problem with that. Then the next question was if OSAR does provide assistance to students who have been affected by such unlawful activities or closures, what assistance is provided? Example, assistance in how to gather evidence, information about how to file a claim, or other. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we answer that one in conjunction with the summary of the current implementation that Christy included in the memo as well, that lists our services there pretty comprehensively, so.
And then you have that case management style that you said, if you go out to a school closure, you assign the student and analyst, so they have that contact that they can immediately get to help with them, any issues they may have with respect to that closure. So they have that personal connection.
Correct.
Page 3 of the memo, we referenced the initial contact letter that comes from the STRIF unit acknowledging receipt of the application. So does the initial contact letter confirming the application for STRIF come from the Bureau or from OSAR? Please provide a sample of the letter.
It comes from the STRIF unit, and we have that sample if you need it as well. We have the template.
Great, that would be wonderful if you could provide that.
Any further questions on that, Ms. Ryder?
No.
Okay. The next one is, does OSAR get involved in every application for STRIF regardless of whether the applicant seeks OSAR assistance?
Directly involved, not necessarily, although in almost every case we would, because currently the STRIF unit evaluates the application for completeness and forwards on to OSAR if there is any need for further assistance, if the application is complete in any way, if it doesn't appear that they've sufficiently documented their economic loss, then it would definitely come to us. We reach out to the student, and if they ask for our assistance, then we'll definitely do that. There is certain scenarios and potential scenarios where an application comes in, the STRIF unit does that initial front-end evaluation, and it looks like everything is there and it's perfect and all the supporting documents are there, then there would not necessarily be a need to refer it to an OSAR analyst. In fact, it's probably the most the thing that's best for the student is just to move it on to Lisa as soon as possible and get it approved. And so that scenario creates the possibility that we would not necessarily get directly involved with every STRIF claim. However, I would also make the argument that in the few cases where they may come in that sort of condition, it's probably because they came to a closed school workshop and OSAR worked with them on the front end. That's me patting myself on the back, so if you'll let me indulge. But so yeah, that's the answer.
Okay, the next question is, does OSAR ever recommend a student not file a STRIF claim?
No. In fact, conversely, we will always encourage the student to file an application. We never want a student to self-select themselves out. We never want a student to look at the application and go, this doesn't look like I'm eligible or it's overwhelming. It's exactly the opposite of what we want, and it's part of the reason why we came into existence is to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, in connection with the secondary review by OSAR, if OSAR finds the economic loss is insufficiently documented, what steps does OSAR take after that secondary review to help the student obtain the full amount of relief that he or she is entitled to from the Bureau?
Sure, we would do things like help them locate additional records from the school that they may not have access to, or often, things are pretty hectic at a closure, and the time that staff has to dedicate to students at the very tail end towards the closure date is often a little bit scattered, and some students will get documents that other students are unsuccessful in getting, and so we will help them do that. through our assistance directly and our connection with the school and or the custodian of records or the owner or whomever we can, we'll try to help them get those additional records. Bank statements, credit card statements, documents from loan servicers. Often students find themselves limiting themselves in terms of ways that they may be able to document payment that they may be eligible for under the economic relief provisions that we will kind of open their minds to. You know, what about your bank statement? What about your credit card statement? What about documentation of overall payments, or like a payment ledger that you got from the school, or anything that you may have? We'll ask about those things, and we'll help them in those ways. We've also had situations where we've evaluated previous claims from other students at the same school that was in the same program. Their application was approved, and therefore that means they had documents to substantiate their economic loss. What did they have that you didn't have? You know what I mean? And dig into that file and see maybe where they got their records and sort of share that pathway to a student as well. So again, overarching statement, the answer is anything we can possibly do to help the student prove their eligibility.
Okay, and the next question is, I understand that a filed STRIF application would include the application form and any supporting documents the student provides with the application. What added documentation does OSAR forward to the Bureau with the STRIF application?
Yeah, pretty much everything I said. Any documents that would substantiate their eligibility, and in fact, the highest amount that they would be eligible for based on whatever their costs were at the school in economic loss. It's a broad answer, but it's because every claim is a little bit different. So whatever it would take to substantiate their eligibility, so that the STRIF unit and LISA would be able to make an informed final decision, we'll forward it all.
Are there any standard forms OSAR uses to forward or transmit the STRIF applications to the Bureau? If so, please provide samples.
We have that template also that we can provide to you.
You could provide that.
Yep.
please.
It's a summary sheet. It's an internal STRIF summary sheet is what we call it, and it documents the STRIF unit's calculation of the final economic loss that they forward to LISA, as well as documentation of all of OSAR's efforts as well, that we help, how we help them. It's that particular portion of it is, you're going to see is pretty narrative heavy. You know, it's just basically a log of all the phone calls we made, the connections we made, the documents that we helped them make, sort of the what was missing when we got the file, and then what we helped them obtain. And it's all in one form.
Okay, the next question is, does OSAR make a recommendation to the Bureau for how to handle a STRIF application? In other words, to grant, in total, deny in part, or other?
No, OSAR does not make recommendations. OSAR documents, as I mentioned several times now, our efforts to substantiate their eligibility, and the Bureau, ultimately Deputy Chief, makes the final determination.
Okay, and then if OSAR did recommend how to handle the STRIF claim, has it ever recommended denial, but you've indicated you don't do that?
Correct.
Does the Bureau notify OSAR of the determination of each STRIF claim?
No, we don't have a specific form like the other one that I mentioned to sort of document that final decision amount. But however, it is input into our sales system, our shared database, and so it's easily available for us to pull down if we needed that.
Okay, the final question is, what, if any, assistance does OSAR offer to students whose STRIF applications are denied in full or part? For example, does OSAR contact students to ensure they are aware of the timing to file an appeal, provide any assistance to students wishing to file an appeal, or refer students who wish to appeal to legal aid?
The denial letters from the Bureau Chief, the standard letter always includes information for the student, making them aware of the appeal, their rights to file an appeal under the statute and regulations, what the process is, and what the deadline is to appeal. So that just is information that goes out standard in the ineligible or denial letter. So we don't do anything beyond making them aware of what their rights are and what the timelines are.
And then, but OSAR, don't you, in your closure letter, when you're helping them, indicate that if they have any further issues, they can come back?
Always come back and contact us, and that's regardless whether it's approved or denied, or they're happy or unhappy with the amount that the Bureau ultimately approved. We're always there to help, even if it was completely successful and they got their reimbursement and it was the amount that they filed for in their claim and everything was perfect, we still put that language in there. We're here to help you. Things change in the future. You may enroll in another school or need assistance enrolling in another school or some other reason why we could help you moving forward. So that's a broad-based statement that's in all of our closure documents, yes.
Thank you very much. I had the impression from some of the remarks that had been made previously that Oser was involved more in what I considered a function of the Bureau to be making recommendations, so on and so on. I think this has very much clarified that for me, and I very much appreciate it. And I would like to see those two, I think there were two forms that you said you used. But I
Absolutely.
think this has been extremely helpful, and it really
Thank you.
fleshed out what was in the memo that I still left me with some questions. And I thank you for not reading my typos. My email.
She didn't say sick between things, like. All right, excellent. So any other questions from the panel on the presentation?
Real quick, I assume that those templates will go to everyone on the committee?
Yep, we can do that.
And
fine.
the only other thing in the data discussion that would be, I think would be helpful is if there's an ability to track the amount of time once you have a fully complete application that it takes to process, like the average or over the course of years or whatever way you want to present it, I think that'd be useful.
I think that's definitely something to consider, but I think it might be a little tough, but I will look into it.
We'll figure out a way, Yep.
Talking like a desk audit where you time how long it takes for somebody to go through the app and confer with the students and stuff? Or what were you looking for, like how long does it sit on someone's desk? Or
Yeah, it's like the reason isn't because student A didn't send you a transcript. You now have all the documents you need. It's the
Okay,
amount of
from
time
the
to
time of
evaluate
completed
and
strip
decide.
app, from
Yeah.
completed strip
Yeah.
app. Okay.
Great. Before you guys escape, if there's any public comment regarding OSAR, did anybody? I'm sorry, Joe. Were you saying something, or Kevin?
I just have a quick question. This is going back to much earlier in the presentation. For the work that you're doing with CalTap, I have a question. I was looking through the different folks in places that you've gone. I'm curious. So when you go to somewhere like Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego,
Yep.
do these often happen on weekdays? And are you seeing a diversification of personnel? So, for example, if you're at Travis, right, that's an Air Force base. There's going to be a lot of Air Force personnel. Are you getting reservists? Are you getting folks that aren't just traditionally active duty personnel that are transitioning out?
Primarily active duty, but that's all handled through a registration and outreach effort that CalVet does as well on base, and through their connection with the education liaison on base. They really put that information out. I shouldn't have mentioned again for the benefit of the new members. It's a very broad-based presentation. The CalTap presentations are very broad-based beyond just education. It's information for all discharging service members and their families are welcome to come about all the benefits that are available to them post-discharge, including but not limited to education. So they go over their employment benefits and hiring preference and entrepreneurship programs and housing loans and things like that. Yep. And even within the education component, OSAR just delivers one part of it as well. It's a valuable part, and it's been very, like I said, very successful. But that outreach in terms of registration and pushing the information out is all done by CalVet.
That's great.
And it is during the weekdays generally, and the turnout has been increasing. They're new like us. They came online a little bit before OSAR, but we mirror each other in a lot of ways, and they're going to be growing quite a bit as well. They're expanding their efforts out into a partnership with community colleges moving forward this year as well, and we look to partner with them on that as well.
Outstanding, thanks. And I'll circle back that question to CalVet as well. Just because there's 46,000 members of the Reserve and the Guard in California, many of whom qualify for the same kinds of benefits that active duty service members qualify for. when leaving active duty, and it's important to, you know, that they're included kind of within that that universe. So
I appreciate it. I think it has to do with CalTAP's charge being tied into some specific dates relative to their discharge date as well, but I'm sure it's not limited to that as well. So yeah, it's a worthwhile effort to sort of look into expanding that as much as we can.
Got it. Hey,
So,
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns about OSAR? Thank you all very much. So folks, it's 1:20. I'm going to make a suggestion and see what everyone thinks. We only have technically 3 substantive items left, 2 of which I think will go pretty quickly. So if we wanted to take a half hour, people can go take a bio break, grab a snack, and come back at, let's say, 1:45, and then hopefully we can hammer out the rest. Does that work for everybody? David, you're shaking your head. What's your issue?
I was hoping just to plow through this thing.
I would love to plow through this thing, but my stomach is growling, and I don't
Okay.
want everyone to hear that. But if we do 1:45, that's only 22 minutes from now. So
All right.
will you agree to 22 minutes?
That's a great compromise.
All right, compromise, 22 minutes. 1:45, we'll return to finish up. Okay, thanks, everybody. It is freezing in here. I think we have our
Let's do it.
team back, so we can get moving on our next agenda item.
All right.
All right, everybody. Kent's already at the table. He was, just sat here the whole time, waiting for everybody to return.
Never left.
So we'll reconvene. We are on item 6, status updates relating to certain regulations. Michael, did you have a
Yes.
preface?
Yep. So this should go pretty fast. Kent is here for me as a backup. So agenda item A, out-of-state registration regular. This is complete and approved by OAL at this point. Going to agenda item B, English language programs. The noticing package has been approved by the department and sent on to agency for its approval. Once it's approved, the package will be submitted to OAL for noticing. Agenda item C, verification of exempt status. The department has approved the package and was sent to agency, and agency has approved the comments and suggestions, which will be reviewed. Agenda item D, compliance laws and policy. This has been submitted to the department for approval. However, we are making minor additions, so the morality of it is going to be on hold for now.
Actually, we've completed that, and it's moving again.
Okay, I love it. Glad to hear it's moving. And then agenda item E, the student records. The notice package is still being developed. Once the package is created, it will be submitted for review and edits by council. Then the department and agency will approve before going to OAL to be noticed. That's my report. Did I miss anything, Kent?
No, I feel like a proud parent.
You should.
So with the one that you said was moving again, which was that C?
D, compliance.
Compliance with laws and policies.
Yeah.
On these that are not yet well, I guess none of these that I'm talking about are yet to the OAL. There's 4 of them.
Yes.
ESL, the exempt status verification, the compliance, and the student records, which you're just working on. Will those come to us for discussion before they go out to, in what point, I mean, often in the past, we've discussed them. I know we've already discussed ESL up and down, and we've discussed compliance, I believe. But will those come back to us before they go out for official notice?
No, all of them have already been through for the discussion like we're about to have with the next set. So they'll be moving on through the process internally and then go to OAL where they're available for the public comment
Right.
for the 45 days when they come
Right.
through.
The one about student records, it hasn't come to us yet, though, right?
Yes, it came through last year.
Yeah, I think we talked about that one in, God, was it August or November?
Something along those lines, yeah, because that's where we got into discussions about electronic records, PDF formats, and things of that nature.
I remember that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. So next up on the, any public comment on the status of the regulations update? Yeah, okay. So there's no one left in here except your own employees. Item 7, discussion and consideration of draft amendments to current regulations.
Okay, I'm going to provide some context, and because of the minimum level of edits, I'm actually going to kind of walk through it very quickly. The entire basis of this is based on a bill passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Brown last year called AB 2138. It significantly rewrote the portion of the Business and Professions Code regarding the denial, suspension, and revocation of licenses, particularly based on criminal or similar acts. The new
Licenses, do you mean like my license to practice law kind of licenses or school licenses?
actually mean most of the licensing under DCA.
Okay.
So,
Nursing, that kind of thing? Okay.
yeah, pretty much.
Thing what? Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, basically, exactly. Anything in Business and Professions Code. This has a delayed implementation. It goes into effect on July 1st, 2020. Under the new bill, we will specifically be under Section 480.2, along with the Athletic Commission and the Horse Racing Board.
Why wouldn't you?
So, as part of the requirement of this, we have to have substantial relationship criteria to establish that the act in question is substantially related to the profession. That's why each board, bureau, and commission is having to review their regulations for this. And also a criteria for rehabilitation. Have you rehabilitated since whatever happened? As it happens, the Bureau has both the substantial relationship criteria and the criteria for rehabilitation. They're sections 75060 and 75070. These should be in your materials, though I don't know exactly what page.
111.
111, thank you. See, I'm always at the back. In this case, one of the things we identified was that it only spoke to the denial of a license. So the first edit that you'll find made through a couple of different portions, sub A of 60, the beginning of 70, along with sub A of 70, it adds suspension and revocation so that it goes beyond just the mere denial.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt?
Yeah, please.
So what we're looking at here, unless it has an underlined, it's what is the current regulation?
Right.
Is it?
Current,
Oh.
current text is,
Yeah, it should be.
is not underlined or struck, and additions or deletions are shown by underline and strikeout.
Okay. I don't have the one in front that you
Oh,
have in
yeah.
front of you.
So if it's struck through, it is in current, but it would be taken out.
Right.
It's shown as struck.
Right. So in the case of the beginning portion of 75060, the section has been changed to note the statutory change of what section it will be from 480 to 480.2. Those changes are made consistently through both sections, including in the authority and references. And we also made a required change in 75070 in both sub D and sub E. It had only referred to applicant. We've added the licensee because we could be acting to suspend or revoke against somebody who has already applied. And the other is just a kind of a correction in 75060, both sub A and sub B. You will see chapter struck out and division replaced. In regulatory law, the division carries all the regulations. For the Bureau, the chapter would actually only refer to Chapter 5. one of the 6 chapters that make up our regulations. And so this will clarify, as it should have to begin with, that it is all of our regulations, not just this one particular section. And those will be the changes. They're based on a very specific requirement from this statute. Questions, comments?
So we could not at this time entertain other additional amendments to these regulations.
This one is specifically required because of the statute, and it is specifically required to be in effect by July 1st, 2020. So
Where is this in the process?
this is in front of you, and
Okay.
as
So we
upon
could, if we
completion.
wanted to, suggest some additional changes,
You could? Yes.
which are unlikely to pass muster.
Well, it just depends. I mean, I think you're always free to make other changes, but I think that the issue is we want to make sure that these get through by July 1st.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But certainly, if you have other suggested amendments, then we could either, do it now or maybe ask the staff calendar it for a future regulatory proposal.
If it's all right, I'll just mention a couple of things now.
Okay.
And I realize the chances
Please.
that it being put in are slight, but I wonder in 75060B, as in boy, it requires both that they're unfit to perform the duties under the act or the division, and that they are unfit to perform them in a manner consistent with public health, safety, or welfare. And the language in a manner consistent with public health, safety, and welfare, looking at it as a prosecutor who would have to prove this, adds an extra layer of something you have to prove. So unless you absolutely need that, I would not include that in a manner consistent with, I think it should be enough if you violate if you can't perform the duties under the act or the division. Okay?
So you would
I would eliminate,
deleting?
I would eliminate in a manner consistent with the public health, safety, or welfare. And I don't know whether for some reason that has to be there or not, but if it could be deleted, I think it's just like one extra layer a prosecutor would have to prove, so.
Right. I understand.
Why do it? And then down in 75070, D as in David, I was recently looking at a case where the judge basically in determining, I think the remedies this was in a prosecution, I think for misrepresentation or something like that. But the judge looked at the fact that the defendant kept on doing the bad practice all the way through being accused of doing it, through trial, and only when there was the final judgment after appeal did they finally stop the bad acts. And so if that could be revised so that it wasn't just that the extent to which they complied, but put some parameters in there, after they were informed of the violation and until.
I will let you know that I understand exactly, and I know exactly where you're going because I was part of a number of discussions last year around 2138. 2138 also very much limits what can be used around these things, including the fact that basically only a conviction can be used, not the factors around it necessarily. So unfortunately, that would go against 2138, even though it makes perfect sense.
Just a couple comments on that. I actually completely disagree with including anything that hasn't been proven to have occurred in a court. Arrests happen all the time based on acts that weren't
That's
don't
the
amount to
basic
probable
idea
cause.
behind 2138.
One thought, and again, I understand you guys are in the process, and so this isn't a assertion, but one possible revision would be so 75070E, including a non-exhaustive list of what rehabilitation, evidence of rehabilitation can be. I've worked in this area in the past, and it can be anything from training certificates to drug and alcohol,
Yeah, depending on the thing. There's also
Yeah.
there's
I've
also
seen
a
these lists
certificate of
before.
rehabilitation in the penal code.
Yeah, so I've seen this in statutory language before. I can't cite you the section, but that might be useful.
Okay.
And I just have a process question. So right now we're taking a look at the proposed language. At which point does this get sent up to DCA proper to then get wrapped up into like an all-encompassing DCA bill that will then be pitched to members, or
No,
how does that work?
this is regulatory in nature.
Oh, this is strictly regulatory.
Yeah, this is strictly regulatory. Once this is completed, I will make a noticing package, which has to go through the approval processes, both, all the internal, and
it.
then go to OAL for their.
Got it. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions or comments about this item from the panel? No? Hold on one second before you step away, Kent. Is there anything else? That had to
I
do with
think,
you?
don't you need a recommendation from the committee, a motion to move it forward? You don't? No? You guys don't do that for regs?
I thought we did.
I thought we do
I-
a recommendation to submit the proposal either as is or,
Right, that's what I thought we had done in the past.
That's what I
Now,
thought we
haven't
had
been here
done,
for a
yeah.
while, but I think
Sometimes we have and sometimes we haven't. I don't think we've done it by motion ever, probably.
really?
Maybe
How do you
once.
do the committee's will then without the motion?
What happens is the Bureau takes back the comments and it decides what it wants to do
We must.
based on the comments.
Consider.
Even if it's a motion, all it is advice, so.
Right,
right.
but that's
But
okay.
it's advice from members
But
and
it's
they
a
can take it or leave
consensus
it.
of what the committee would like you to change or not change, because that's really what we're here for, is to find out what you think your suggestions would be for the reg. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if the motion is, we're okay with it as drafted, that's your recommendation. The other one would be, if you want to suggest either now or later doing a proposal. But I guess my point is we want to know what the collective body thinks of all of the discussions that have, understand
What's
what I'm
happened in
saying?
the past is we've had these kinds of regulatory things come up, and Margaret has her idea and my idea is completely different. And so the Bureau has just taken under advisement our thoughts and the consideration without a motion, because we wouldn't have had consensus because we disagreed. So,
We might have
up to you.
consensus here.
Yeah, with this set, maybe.
I'll move. We'll
Okay,
see what
yeah.
happens. I move that with the proposed amendment to 75060B, deletion of the phrase "in a manner consistent with the public health, safety, or welfare," that the committee approve this with the further suggestion that if a list can be added to 75070E, that makes sense, that be done. I get, it's a little hard to do a motion when we don't have language,
I'll second.
Can I just amend that, the last part, because that's not really a motion. Just to say that as to 75070E, that the Bureau consider and develop a proposed list to include. And then we'll look at it to see
I
if
think
we like it.
consider is appropriate to say consider, right?
Work.
So I'll restate that. Ms. Ryder has made a motion relating to recommendations relating to 75050B and 75060, 75060 Section B and 75070 E.
Right.
And I will second the motion of that recommendation. And how'd that go? That work? Richie, can you do the roll? So I don't screw it up
Can you
again.
ask for additional member comment and then any public comment
sure.
before we take a vote?
From the panel, right.
From the
Yes.
panel first and then.
Yes. Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay. So we have a motion and a second, and Richie's going to take roll.
So before that, I'm fairly clear on Ms. Ryder's comment for 75060B as in boy. I'm not entirely clear on 75070. Was that sub
E.
E as an elephant?
So I would assume, and I'll ask Lyons, Ms. Lyons, for input on this as well, because I think you're the one that originated the first recommendation. So what you're suggesting is like examples of rehabilitation evidence the Bureau will consider include, and then like there could be a list.
I think that would be helpful to people who fall under this.
Right.
And it's been a long time since I have known this area of the code, but I do believe either in the statutory, either in one of the codes or in some regulations, you might be able to find, and I can look for it and email you.
Well, actually, there's some boards in the department that do have lists of
Yeah.
of rehabilitation evidence. I would cite in a couple examples would be Accountancy Board, California Board of Accountancy, and the Pharmacy Board. And I don't know if Noreen knows any others that they do actually have a list of in regulation or in their disciplinary guidelines, which are adopted in regulation as well, that includes what they will consider as evidence of rehabilitation.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion
So-
is that it not be exhaustive, that it
Right,
be
well, it
included but not
includes.
limited to, but to
Includes.
give guidance, basically.
Yeah. I am not specifically aware of a kind of list. I am aware of statements that are used to evaluate the evidence of rehabilitation that shows a state of mind.
I think we understand where you're going, and I think that, we can look at contractor state license board has it in regulation, pharmacy board has it in regulation, accountancy board has it in regulation, and then we can look at other examples of maybe statements, as Ms. Marks has indicated, that might be more generic or general, that would capture the concept of, the idea of what they're looking for in terms of showing that there's been a change in behavior since the act or conviction occurred.
The idea is guidance.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And just looking at some more on E, it seems to me it should say evidence of relevant rehabilitation rather than any, so that you're not going to have to consider, all
Well,
kinds
but then we'd have to define what's relevant, and then,
including, and then you have the list.
well, I think I would suggest staying away from adding that word, just because then we'd have to fight with the Office of Administrative Law about what we believe is relevant, and they'd probably make us delineate each
Yeah.
example of what we consider relevant and what the standard is, and I think I think our position has always been to recommend that we allow them to submit whatever they think they
Then
need
then
to
just
prove their
eliminate the
case.
word any.
I would keep it
I
in
don't
there
know that you
because
need
we
that.
don't want to limit the petitioner or the applicant or the licensee's discretion in their judgment in what they believe they need to prove, because they have the burden of proving they're rehabilitated.
I think that
one thing I would just say,
burden any way they'd like.
sorry for interrupting you. One thing I would say is the discretion is on the side of the agency here, so that discretion isn't limited by this list. It's more about giving the applicant or licensee the opportunity to know what to submit. And so I think also by identifying that it's rehabilitation, you've already limited. I mean, if someone submits their Girl Scout resume, I mean, that's on them. That's not going to be relevant, and it's not a sign of rehabilitation as well, right? So that's limited by the definition.
But I think the danger in listing particular types of rehabilitation is that the respondent then comes along and says, here you said evidence of, my Girl Scout record or something like that. Here it is. And then do you have some presumption then that they are rehabilitated? I think there is a danger to that as well.
I don't see that at all. I mean, the language here is very clearly discretionary. It's very clearly, it's just, you can make the language including but not limited to,
Yeah.
and I think that covers you.
I've worked with all the clients I just mentioned, and they haven't had a problem with that because what weight the agency gives it is always
Exactly.
within the discretion of the agency. So it's more about, in their experience, being kind of customer service oriented and not hiding the ball and being transparent and helping guide people. But at the end of the day, they still evaluate it for credibility and whether it should be accepted and counted, because there's a lot of aspects of rehabilitation besides that document, and there's questions about, why they did it, how they did it, and that kind of can tease out whether they have truly a good intent in terms of rehabilitation. So
we'll take all of this information under consideration. Thank you.
Given that, do we need anything else from a motion standpoint, or can you just take it under consideration and go with just our input?
I think we can take it under consideration and see where the Bureau would like to go with it.
Okay. Makes sense to me. Okay, so any public comment? I think we only have, I think Angela's the only one left in the audience who's from the public. Angela, any thoughts? No, we're good? Okay. I think, unless, Ken, are you going to talk about the ISA stuff too?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next item up is item 8, income share agreements.
Was there a vote?
thought we just
I
said we
I know there
weren't
was a
gonna
motion
vote.
and second. I don't recall if there was a vote.
I thought we just
if
said
you-
we were just going to take it under advisement.
Withdraw your second. I'll withdraw.
Okay, I'll withdraw my second.
I withdraw my motion.
So we just take it under consideration. Got it. Okay.
The only thing is that we don't know what the collective consideration is if you don't have a motion that you vote on. That's what I'm asking, because what I think we've gotten away from is finding out what the committee thinks about issues as opposed to just taking individual comments. And so
My comment
find-
about taking it under advisement was about the particular amendments, but I still thought that there was going to be a
vote.
vote on the motion to recommend to the Bureau to notice that language for noticing.
All right, I'll
Wilson.
try again. I move that the Bureau take under consideration the following for Section 75060B, deletion of the phrase deletion of the phrase in a manner consistent with the public health, safety, or welfare. And as to 75070E, that the Bureau take into consideration a change that would include a list of rehabilitation possibilities.
And with that, you recommend that the Bureau notice the language for, or approve the language for noticing.
I'll take that as an amendment to my motion and accept it.
I will second as amended.
David Rice. Dr. Snowden. Aye.
Aye.
Margaret. Madeline Lyons.
Aye. Aye.
Joseph Holt.
Yes.
Wow, that was far more complicated than was necessary. All right. Now we've got it down, and it's the last item. So, no public comment. I think we already established that. Now we're on item 8, income share agreements, state or federal pending legislation updates. Mr. Kent.
Yes. AB 154 was introduced, obviously, in the Assembly to create a pilot program for income sharing agreements at both UC and Cal State. They would each select one campus to initiate this pilot program. Without going into the details of the bill, it went into Assembly appropriations, went into the suspense file, which for those who aren't familiar with legislative process, anything that's above a certain level on fiscal impact, which I believe is currently $250,000, automatically goes into suspense file, and suspense file's heard at the end, and it did not come out of suspense. So it is now a 2-year bill and will be revisited next year.
I think it's 150, but
154.
But your everything else was made total sense. Yeah, so I think this was, because this is my favorite topic and something that I follow closely. There is, for those interested, there is actually a U.S. Senate bill that was published within the past 2 months that would provide a federal sort of construct around ISAs. Who knows where that's going to go, if it goes anywhere. And we sort of do a national tracking of this, and still, as of now, there is not a state that has passed any legislation or regulation that specifically provides guidance on ISAs. So it still continues to be one of those things that people are trying to figure out, and they're gaining popularity, and we're seeing more and more of them. And so in the meantime, everyone's trying to figure out what the construct is, and there isn't one, and they're continuing to become more popular. More schools are introducing them. We're seeing more different kinds of funding. I mean, it's growing in a rapid way, and there is still like no legal structure around them. So I will continue to bring this up, I think, as this goes forward, and I'll keep you all updated, and obviously if further California-related legislation comes up, I would want us to discuss that too.
Do you happen to know the Senate bill number?
Not off the top of my head, but I do. I actually have it saved in my computer. So
Can
when
you
we're done,
just
I'll give
send
to
it? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
fine. Or I was going to say you could give it to Mike or somebody and he could send it around to everybody.
Okay, yeah, I can do that too. No one else cares, it's just me and Margaret. Okay, so any comments from the panel about that, the bill that has died in the Appropriations Committee for as of now, until next January anyway? Okay, public comment? Angela, public comment? Okay, so I think that gets us to future agenda items. Thank you, Kent. I'll open up to the panel for any suggestions about future agenda items.
I'll just make a comment regarding the next meeting. There's some of us that will not be able to attend that date. There's an industry function.
So the next scheduled date is November 13th.
13th.
And it does overlap with the National Private School Association. That one is actually in San Diego, the one that Dave's talking about. And I think that David and Joseph were both planning to attend that. So I don't know if it is, we will have a quorum without them. So whether or not there is an opportunity to maybe reschedule the meeting so that we will have a quorum, or if that's something that we can discuss now, or.
Maybe have the staff survey and get back to the members.
Okay.
I have a future agenda topic. I think it would be very helpful if, given our discussion this morning about how much of complaint information can be made available to us, if you could provide, the legal staff could provide us with an analysis of, what our limitations are as far as getting that kind of information as to complaint handling.
I'm not quite sure without identifying specific documents how we would do that.
Well, take a complaint from the time it comes in until it leaves. What aspect of that would you not be able to disclose to us, and what aspect would you be able to? And that's one. And the second question is, and if you did it without identifying the individuals, or, are there ways that you could provide the information in a more limited form if you can't? I mean, I know you can't provide the whole thing, nor do I want it, but, an explanation of what you could provide that would be within legal restrictions. In other words, we had a discussion today about, no, we can't release any of this, and then I think Natalie had mentioned she thinks there's some things we could release, and it would be very nice if the committee had an understanding of exactly what those parameters are.
Anyone else have any future items? Joseph?
Yeah, I have a suggestion which may be inappropriate, and if it is, strike it from the agenda, from the minutes. So with sunset on the horizon, forgive the pun, and the long timeline for like the IT upgrade, I'm just curious. I'd like to hear, given the gap in the last a couple times ago when the bureau went away for. There was that period,
The
dark period. I'd love to hear from staff in terms of strategizing for that process and for the legislative hearings, and to see if there's anything we can do as an advisory committee to maybe help or support or guide that. I appreciated a question that Ms. Ryder shared earlier regarding, there was a question she was asking, and she indicated that the legislature was likely to ask that question. And so I think that's a role that maybe we could help with. So what's the strategy look like for sunset? Are we prepared? Are we ready?
Dr. Marion, do you want to maybe have someone from the department come and explain how sunset review is conducted and maybe how we prepare for that? Because we have kind of standard procedures for that.
I think that'd be helpful. I think it'd be also helpful to the extent that we can have some more specificity as to things that the Bureau is looking at with regard to it. I don't know if at this point you can, but I think that would be helpful where you see that there may be issues. I mean, like, we know that the legislature has been very unhappy in the past about how much the Bureau has done and how up to date it is, how far behind it is, how involved it is in handling major problems. If there's things that you're looking at and saying, here's what we think we can do to address this, or here's something more we need to, here's additional staffing we want, just sort of preliminary thinking about it, as well as just the overview of how that process, the sunset review process works, I think would be good.
And obviously, we will, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure everybody on the panel agrees that anything that we can do to kind of be helping you think through,
Yes.
we're happy to help. Any other agenda items? No? Michael wants lunch. That's agenda item number 10. Any other public comment before we adjourn? All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
With that, we will adjourn, and we will see you in November on a date TBD.